This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp to provide you with access to the largest online therapy service in the world. And it can all be done from the comfort of your own home, from a phone, tablet or laptop. No commute, cutting down travel costs, and most importantly, it's affordable. With over 1,000 therapists in the UK, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise in mental health. If you need someone to talk to and you're thinking of giving therapy a go, BetterHelp is a great option. And being a listener of the podcast, you get 10% off. That's 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lifeandfilm. That's betterhelp.com/lifeandfilm. Welcome to A Life in Film. I'm Elliot James Langridge. I'm an actor, writer, and apparently a podcaster, and I love film. This is the podcast that we ask our guests from in front and behind the camera, how did they get their foot in the door? What was the key to unlocking their success? What's their story? Previous guests include Neil Marshall, Dexter Fletcher, Andrea Riseborough, Natalie Emmanuel, and Lucinda Sison. From Hollywood blockbusters, The Peacemaker and Deep Impact, to some of the biggest shows on television, including The Leftovers, Shameless, ER, and The Morning Show. Our guest today is pioneering female director Mimi Leder.
It's a life in film. 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 Woo!
Glory, everybody wants the power.
You know, we were supposed to change things, weren't we? I wanted to make a difference.
I need to have a say in the future of this place.
I want to build something that matters. I want to win.
It isn't real. It's all smoke and mirrors.
You need a miracle. I am offering you a lifeline.
5, 4, 3. Honestly, let all the secrets come out. They did not protect me.
They didn't protect you, but I did.
It's time to smash and shatter. Let's burn it all down.
I hope it was all worth it.
Everybody fighting for it. Everybody wants the power.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you today, Mimi?
I'm good. I'm here.
I feel like, you must have a lot of people to chat to today, so I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Firstly, I've already smashed through the entire series, third season of The Morning Show, and I love it, and I can't wait to see and hope that there's another season to come after that. But before we chat about the show, I'd love to ask you, because a lot of our audience are kind of, film fans. I mean, you've obviously done a lot of classic movies, great TV.
Great.
How did that all begin for you? Because your career now is easy to look at it and go, oh, no, it must have been easy. But what were the beginning steps?
Well, it was really hard getting my first job. And I grew up in a filmmaking family. My father was an ultra low budget B movie maker. He made 23 features, and I worked on a lot of them with my sister and my brother. And there I learned how to do everything, and with no money. And of course, I went into mainstream television and film primarily, but I learned everything in growing up with my family, which was really unusual because it was a filmmaking family. And, I got my first break on LA Law. And, it was a time when very few women were being hired. And Greg Hoblet, Stephen Bochco, but mainly Greg Hoblet was a big believer in my work, in who I was as a, burgeoning filmmaker. And, he gave me my first break. And then I went on to direct China Beach. Now, I'm probably skipping a lot of stuff. And China Beach was a broadcast show. I don't know if you ever saw it. You're way too young. But
no, I didn't, unfortunately.
But you have to find this show and see it, because it's where John Wells, actually we met on a small show earlier, but this is where we became I was hired on that show to direct 2 episodes that he had written. And John Sacred Young was the showrunner with William Broyles. And basically that show was about nurses in Vietnam, but it was a little movie every week. And that's where I feel I really learned my craft. And the reason it's hard to find that show is because we used Motown in every single great piece of music. And it took years to negotiate those rights. And so somewhere at Warner Television, you can buy that set. Anyway, I'm only saying it's a very worthwhile series, and it really changed my life.
I'm going to have to hunt that down now. I'm going to make it my mission.
China Beach with Dana Delaney and Marg Helgenberger. Yeah, no, it was 1988. And it was really a strong anti-war show. But it was all character driven, which is what I always, move toward, because that's the best stories are told, I think, through the character's POV. And so, yeah, I'm skipping a lot, but I don't even remember the question, but I went on to ER after the pilot was directed, again with John Wells, and I became the executive producer alongside him. And that is where I, changed very much the look of the show in terms of adding 75% Steadicam work to tell the story, which became a signature of the show. And so Steven Spielberg, company Amblin, produced the show. And one day he was on the set. I didn't know he was on the set. And I was shooting like a 7-page oneer, which also became a signature in the show. I was telling these stories, not just people rolling gurneys down the hallway, but intricate scenes into gurneys coming into surgeries, and they were very intricate. So it was like I would design these with the actors. I would choreograph the whole thing with the actors. Then I would fold in the camera. This is how we're going to shoot it, blah, blah. Then I would fold in the sound, then I'd fold in the extras. And it took hours, 4 hours perhaps, to do 7 pages. But it was quite an exciting time. And Spielberg was in the corner, and the DP came up to me and whispered in my ear, said, "Steven Spielberg's been watching you for about an hour and a half."
Wow.
And, it was really kind of like, what? And it was fun. And there we met. And then he asked me to come to his office one day. And I don't know why I'm telling you this story.
Oh, please.
But he said, "What kind of films do you want to make?" And I said, "Well, I want to make films like Schindler's List and et cetera, et cetera." So a couple of months later, he called me and he said, "Mimi, I've got this great TV show I want you to direct. It's a cop show. And ER is 52 million viewers. It's going through the roof." And it was really great storytelling. And I said, "With all due respect, Steven, why would I leave, ER to do a cop show? With all due respect." And thank you, goodbye. And then a few months later, he calls me and says, "I'm not calling you about a little tiny cop show. I'd love you to direct DreamWorks' first feature, an action movie." And I was like, "Well, I don't direct action. What are you talking about? Why are you offering me this movie?" Anyway, he told me I directed action every day on television with my camera work. And so that changed my life significantly and that began my feature career.
Mark, yep. 94 easy, take one. Mark.
Action! It was very difficult to find a feature, to get a feature when I was directing television, even when I was succeeding greatly and winning Emmys for directing. it was still very hard to secure a film that I wanted to tell.
Really? So the crossover was, because now people, I feel like they verge over to each to the next a bit more now. Was there
Exactly.
still that gap then?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it changed. TV became the place to be. And, when the movie business changed. And, I personally have never looked at it any differently. The only thing for me, you can still hear me, right? Because you're frozen.
Yeah, no, I can hear you. Oh yeah, I am frozen. That's weird. I
Yeah.
can see myself frozen. No, I can hear you. So
You're in
please
a,
carry on.
you're in a prayer kind of state right now.
I don't even
And
remember doing that.
anyway, I approach a film and television in the very same way. The only thing for me that becomes a major discussion in what is different is the film ratio, the aspect ratio. Is it going to be, 16:9? Is it going to be 1:35? I'm sorry, 2:35? And in our ratio on the morning show, it's 2:1, I believe, and which is a higher frame and a wider frame. And it all has to do with the story and the movie you're telling. Like when I shot On the Basis of Sex, when I decided with Michael Grady, our DP, what are we going to shoot this in? It all had to do with the courthouse, the court building. It's so high, and if you shot it in a 2:35 ratio, you would have to go so far back, and that's why I decided not to shoot it in that ratio. And anyway, in terms of television and film, there are more women directing in television than ever, and more in film as well. But the numbers still aren't as they should be.
Now for a quick break. Are you a writer, director, actor, costume designer, perhaps makeup artist? Are you interested in camera? This is the place to share your journey. We want to hear from you. How did you start your career? Has it started yet? And perhaps, if you're feeling brave, share with us your most embarrassing film-related moment. So slip into our DMs at Life in Film Pod on Instagram. Check out the Patreon at patreon.com/Life in Film, where you'll get episodes early and uncut amongst other treats. And don't forget to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy this episode, please leave us a positive rating. Add us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Life in Film Pod, and find our video episodes on YouTube by searching Elliot James Langridge Life in Film. Essentially, please like and subscribe everything. It makes a huge difference. Thank you. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you work in the film industry? Are you freelance? Or perhaps you have a 9-to-5? No matter what you do, mental health affects us all. I struggled early on in my career with the uncertainty of if and when I would ever work again, struggling to pay my bills, or simply with anxiety. Don't know about you, but being an actor, it's very important for me to maintain structure in the downtimes, and I found not only exercise, but talking to someone for me was a game changer. And so Life in Film has partnered with BetterHelp to provide you with access to the largest online therapy service in the world. And it can all be done from the comfort of your own home, from a phone, tablet or laptop. No commute, cutting down travel costs, and most importantly, it's affordable. With over 1,000 therapists in the UK, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise in mental health. If you need someone to talk to and you're thinking of giving therapy a go, BetterHelp is a great option. And being a listener of the podcast, you get 10% off. That's 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lifeinfilm. That's betterhelp.com/lifeinfilm. And back to the show. I feel like, just to carry on from what you're saying there, I feel like you're an example and someone that has led the way for women in the industry, not just in directing, but producing and there's so many things. I mean, early on as well. You mentioned the film there that Spielberg offered you, and I presume that was Deep Impact. Am I right in thinking that?
The first film was The Peacemaker.
Oh, it was The Peacemaker came first, yes.
Yes, and it was my first film. I had a lot of success on ER, and while I was posting The Peacemaker, Stephen and Sherry Lansing asked me to direct Deep Impact. So while I was mixing that film, I was prepping Deep Impact, which was an enormous piece of film. an enormous, big storytelling experience. And yeah, both were really exciting to tell. There were some motorcycles, behind him.
Yeah, there was one.
So we should put some.
They were there. They were supposed to cross behind him. There they go.
Where?
Production went smoothly because Mimi was a good general. It was just everybody knew what they had to do.
We shot a lot of Deep Impact on location. We shot in Virginia, we shot in D.C., and it's always hard to shoot in D.C. It's very difficult because there's lots of restrictions.
And they took over a bridge on a Sunday. I couldn't believe what a film company was capable of doing. And if I'd been a citizen of Washington, I would have led a parade. It was just it was appalling. We owned this bridge for a day. I don't think they let any traffic through because they had so many stunts that they were doing on it. And and then you look at the film and it's all of 15 seconds.
.285A, take 4 marker.
All right, let's shoot it, please.
Can I ask you a question actually about Deep Impact? That
Anything.
movie was a big influence on me when I was a kid. I loved that movie, and it's something I really remember going to see with my mum in the cinema. Huge, obviously, budget, massive film. But I do seem to remember at the time there was a rival movie in that Armageddon was coming out around the time. They both kind of, in the UK anyway, they were kind of coming out at the same time. Were you aware that when you were shooting the movie, this was going to be a thing, or?
Well, in the middle of shooting the movie, we realized that's when we heard Armageddon was happening. And it was, we were way ahead of them in terms of our schedule. And yeah, that was, both films made a ton of money. Both films were very successful. My film, our film, was more science-based and story-wise, far more emotional, far more, in my point of view, far more, not just about saving the world and the end of the world and about a comet coming to kill us all, but about if you knew a comet was coming and you knew it was the end of the world as we know it, what would you do in that time that you had to live? What would you do with your life if you knew, I have 6 months? It's, a little bit different than, or very similar to someone who is sick and has 6 months to live. But if you're not sick and you're vital and you know it's going to end, how would you live your life? And that was the theme of the movie to me. And I think that's why it affected so many people, because I think we think about that a lot. At least I do. Life, death, how is the best way to live our lives? And what is the purpose? And so that was the theme of the movie. And so, yes, there was not competition on my end, but it was very interesting at my premiere when I turned around and someone said, "Mimi, have you met Michael Bay?" And he was at my premiere. And I found that to be very interesting. And I'll leave that with you. I won't go further, but he hadn't finished his movie. And or maybe he did some reshoots after he saw my movie. I don't know. All I know is that he was there and it was very strange. That's when it got strange for me. New York, I had just filmed a humongous chase sequence in New York for Peacemaker. And it was really interesting because I remember I was, walking through the streets of New York shooting, and all these extras started, "Hey, Mimi, how you doing?" It was like the same group of people that I had worked with, or a lot of them. And I always loved shooting in New York. I love New York. And then we shot The Comet, which was a movie onto itself.
Tom,
had enough being an astronaut after this one, I think. I would rather maybe be in one maybe less realistic than this.
We talked about special training for the astronauts. We really didn't do any. We actually didn't have the time for it. And so, you know, they sort of just jumped in, and it was a very tiresome, grueling experience for them because they were in these spacesuits where, you know, they couldn't go to the bathroom for hours. They were hanging off of wires. They were on a spaceship that was hanging off of wires. And we literally were hanging our actors. And so, you know, I had come off Peacemaker where I had done some visual effects. But in this film, I was really jumping in to the deep end.
A big part of my job is to be right there with Mimi all the time, you know, providing support and providing advice and also helping her solve problems every minute of the day when they come up. I mean, we can take the top of the arch out. As the wave gets closer and closer, the, you know, flags blowing back, goes out of the frame.
That would be wonderful.
Tree squirrels landing everywhere.
That's wonderful.
And
so we'll do a straight version like this.
Yep.
Then we'll just do.
And there were always lots of questions for me. Well, what do you think you're going to need? And at times you don't know what you're going to need.
I started showing different artwork to Mimi, like after a couple of weeks after we got involved with this movie. And I can't even tell you how many color variations. The palette that we went through was, you know, everything from green to blue to orange to red and everything. And we were designing that comet even as the shots were going into progress because I would not like something or Mimi would not like something, or as she cut in shots, it didn't work. And there was a point in time, I remember 3/4 of the way through our production, Dick Zanuck called up and he said, you know, I think we've got to make this thing look meaner and make it look more fierce, even though we've been true to science. And I said, you know, I couldn't agree with you more. So we started stripping away the vapor to show more of the rock and that sort of thing. And actually, one fellow that I've worked with a long time, Joel Aaron, he was working on the comet at that time, and I said, you know what, let's put in a really mean face in there. So there's actually a little face in there on the front of the comet, and it's been kind of pulled away and sculpted away so that you can see a little bit more of that.
It was truly a process. You couldn't start the movie thinking, knowing what you would end up with. You had an idea. You had a blueprint.
If we have some storyboards that kind of represent each of the cuts, and Mimi likes that, then we're ready to do the next step, which is go into animatics, where we actually animate these. And we don't do it for every shot, but maybe certain shots and really important shots where it's a little bit hard to visually figure out. Sometimes the storyboard is very clear, and that's good. But if you have a movement or something like a ship landing, and you need to know more, what would the camera angle be? How high should the camera be off the side, surface? Should it be sitting on the surface? See it tilt down? You know, you play with all those things just like if there was a real camera there. And then we, once again, show that to Mimi, and she cuts it in, and they decide, is that the look that they want? And these are all steps that are supposed to save money so that you arrive at what the idea will be sooner rather than later, because it's a lot more expensive to change the shot later.
And, you know, as there were budget restrictions, you would lose visual effects and try and do it practically. And Les Dilly, our production designer, built this comet that took over the entire stage of Stage 15 at Paramount. And I was filming one aspect of the show, of the movie, and he brought me over at lunch to Paramount to look at the beginning stages, and it was all built out of some sort of styrofoam. And it looked so silly. We talked about colors. He'd show me tests of what color it was and how much texture and rut it had. And in the process of building the comet, he would bring over the cameraman so that the cameraman could build in light sources so that the shadows could be played a certain way. And the comet is alive and breathing, so we wanted areas for all the mist to come out of. And we created a lot of that mist, and then of course ILM added the rest of it. And underneath the comet was an army of special effects guys and lighting guys, moving, you know, lights, throwing steam in, snow was everywhere. I mean, we had to literally come on the set with masks because the air was, filled with snow that we created.
Then we at ILM would essentially enhance or enlarge the background of the set, whether it's vapors or sky, or more rolling comet tundra, you might say, going off into the distance, so that it doesn't stop at that wall. And we do that on most movies these days. And for the master shots then, we did have a miniature comet surface, and we had basically a 12-foot ship that's flown around on our motion control stage, and that is composited against that smaller background.
Well, the Messiah was a spaceship that Les and I talked about what it looked like, and then he drew it up, presented it to me, and we played with it, and then we handed it over to ILM, and they built miniatures, and then Les built a set for me. And what was great about building your sets is that you can really design your shots. And I had a lot of shots in mind that I would tell Les, I want to start in this hole and come down and come all the way down into this area here. So a lot of the set was designed for specific shots, and then it just falls together. And there was, the attention to detail was, nothing was left undone.
In the original version of the script, I had images of people trying to get out of Manhattan and the people with kayaks trying to get across to New Jersey just so they could get some possibility of moving inland. And those images were, for me, very large and very, very compelling. I think Mimi got enormous mileage out of the images that she has, and the destruction of New York is terribly disturbing. And I think that if it had been bigger, I don't know if people could have handled it, but what I had in my own mind as I was writing it was pretty large and very, very, very disturbing.
I had a more elaborate set of stunts going on in the wave, which I think would have taken away from the horror of it, because I wanted to have whales, steamships. I wanted to have a couple of surfers. I think I'd written this in an earlier draft, which everybody nixed immediately.
I had imagined all of Brooklyn lining the shores, all of these people who had literally nowhere to go, nowhere to run. And so people, rather than sitting in their homes, they came to the shores in masses of numbers, and hundreds of thousands of people stand there looking out at the world, looking out at the ocean, and then they see the wave and they all reach out to each other hand upon hand, people who never met each other, who never knew each other, all together in this last one gasp of a moment, and then the huge wave overtakes them all.
But for me, the film felt like they should be alone. You know, when that picture was taken, when Vanessa Redgrave's character takes this photograph, they're alone on the beach. And I felt that it was very symbolic and far more emotional and far more gratifying to see the resolution of this relationship on the beach, alone, and not in a party atmosphere.
I've missed you since then.
I missed you too.
Then we had to produce the sad image of the giant wave coming in from the background and add that into the landscape.
So we had to design the wave. Is it bluish? Is it greenish? How much foam does it have? How fast is it? And so these were really great discussions we had. We developed the character of the wave.
I wanted so badly to be able to go out and shoot some water, but there was no way, because just a very rudimentary test showed that there's no way it would fit in. So everything that we did was a created wave using really difficult programming. We had people working on trying to create software for close to 7 months. And I remember there's a shot also when the water pulls back off the sand. Chris Townsend, a CG artist, he worked on that shot close to 5 months. And this was all new territory long before Perfect Storm came along, and we were kind of a stepping stone in the progression of films that we're going to be doing more and more computer graphics water.
It's a Life in Film, motherfucker. Subscribe and like and follow.
Unfortunately, due to technical difficulties, we did have to cut this interview short. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you to our guest Mimi, and thank you to Charlotte at IDPR.